You want to have a $90,000 college fund in 10 years. How much will you have to deposit now under the scenarios below? Assume that you make no deposits into the account after the initial deposit. Our scenario will be an APR of 7% compounded daily. In order to do this, we need to use the compound interest formula. It is read as A equals P times the quantity 1 plus APR over N, all raised to the N times Y power. Now let's understand exactly what each one of these values or variables will be represented as once we calculate the problem. We're going to start with A. A is equal to the accumulated balance Then we'll have P. P is going to be the initial principal or starting principal. Then we have APR. APR is your annualized percentage rate. Then there's N. N will represent the number of the number of compounding periods per year. And finally we have Y. And Y will represent the number of years that we will have this thing running. So just simply number of years. Now in order to put everything together, we need to look at the problem and we need to assign the values to each one of the variables. One of the variables will not have an assigned value because that's what we'll be solving for. So we need to go back to the problem and we need to reread it. It says you want to have a $90,000 college fund in 10 years. Well, the $90,000 college fund, that's what you're going to have as an accumulated balance. So we'll let A be equal to $90,000. So that's my A. Then we want to have that in 10 years. Well, that's going to be the number of years, so that will be big Y, and that will be equal to 10. How much will you have to deposit now under the scenarios below? Well, that right there is asking the question. How much will you have to deposit now under the scenarios below? So that's going to be my P, and that is unknown. That's my initial principal, and I don't know what it's going to be. Then I'm further told that I need to assume that I will make no deposits. So that means there's no other money going into this. And then I'm told that I have an APR of 7%. So that means that APR will be equal to 0.07 because this must always be as a decimal. And this is compounded daily. Well, compounded daily means that little n will be equal to 365. Now, when I look at this, I see that the one thing that I'm missing is P. So when I look at my initial formula, I need to solve this for P. The easiest way to solve this for P would be to simply divide by this right here on both sides of the equation, which means I will end up with the following. And now we are simply going to plug our values into this equation and then calculate. Remember that the following values are what we're going to use. So A is equal to 90,000, Y is 10, P is unknown, APR is 0.07, and N is 365. So once we input these values into the formula, this is what we'll end up with. So we have 90,000 over the quantity 1 plus 0.07 divided by 365 raised to the 365 times 10 power. This is where most students have difficulties, and that's in evaluating this. When you plug this into a calculator, you need to plug it in exactly as it's written. And if you do any of the intermediate steps and then plug it back in, you are subject to round-off error. And we're trying to minimize round-off error. So what I suggest is using an advanced scientific calculator, a graphing calculator, or any number of online scientific calculators. I'm going to recommend one here, and I'm going to show you exactly how to input these values into this given online calculator. And I recommend that that you use the following calculator, and it is at the following URL: WEB, the number 2.0calc.com. And this is a great online graphing calculator that will help you visualize exactly what we're putting into the formula and how it calculates. Unfortunately, this thing does come with ads, and so you'll just have to bear with them. Now, I'm going to input the following values, and I'm going to show you exactly how I do this. Since the 90,000 is in the numerator and everything else is in the denominator, I want to make sure that we keep everything separate, because that fraction bar is akin to using a set of parentheses. So if I enter a parentheses and then enter the number 90,000 and I close the parentheses, notice that I've gone too far and it shows up above and also in the calculation window. So I need to fix that. And we will go ahead and back 10 out of this thing. And remember, I said that we're going to go ahead and close out with parentheses. Now I will left click the division symbol. Now you can use your keyboard shortcuts for this, but I'm going to open a parentheses and then I'm going to open another parentheses. This first parentheses that I'm going to open is going to look similar to this, because what I'm doing here is just go ahead and putting a parentheses around the outside of this so that I make sure that all those calculations are done together. I'm using the order of operations. So now that I've set my second parentheses, I will type in the number 1 plus, and then I'm going to open another set of parentheses to encompass the 0.07 and the 300 and divided by 365. So 0.07 divided by 365. I'm going to close those parentheses, and then I'm going to close the parentheses again. And that means that everything that's inside, which is the 1 plus 0.007 over 365, can now be raised to an exponent. And I'm going to use this x to the y key, or you could simply type shift the number 6. And then I'm going to put in another open parentheses, and I'm going to type 365 times 10. And I'm going to close those parentheses. Now, if you look very carefully at the display above the calculator interface, you'll see that I have exactly the same thing there that is in the, or I should say that is on the whiteboard that I've written down. I need to just go ahead and close this last set of parentheses, which really doesn't do anything to the figure above, but I just want to make sure that the calculator is following everything that I'm doing. Notice that right here and right here, this one and this one, those close a set of parentheses. This one and this one close a set of parentheses. This one right here and this one right here close a set of parentheses. And then this one here and this one here close a set of parentheses. So I now have everything enclosed, and I will simply left click the equals button. And I end up with the following huge value. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that into the problem so that we can look at it. So I now know that this is going to be equal to the following. Now, this is the value that I end up with. This is going to be my initial principal. This is what I should invest. But obviously, I cannot invest this whole value, and I'm going to simply round to 2 decimal points, or I should say places, and so I end up with $44,695.68. That's rounded to 2 decimal places, since cents are always indicated as 2 decimal places. Like I said, you need to do this all together so that you do your final rounding at the very end. And in fact, the directions will say do not round until the final answer, then round to 2 decimal places as needed. This is going to be the easiest way to calculate this.